It took me a while to get there. Good morning, all.
I think they're muted.
Yeah,
How you doing?
good. How about yourself?
Good. I'm still standing. I'm still standing.
Hey, you guys got a doozy out there of an initiative. You know what I'm talking about?
Let's not start. Don't
Um,
start with me.
I just heard about it, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm not happy.
I know I have your teams.
It's terrible.
Is that Mayor McCollum? Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
before I just left you a voicemail, before we get started on stationary stores, I got some calls from advocates who are hoping we would be willing to move agenda item 4 up to the top of the agenda. They intend to provide public comment and they wanted to go early and leave.
I have no problem with doing that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, thank you very much. I wasn't going to make that ask in committee without running it by my chairman first. So thank you. Either I can ask at the top of your meeting or you can just do it, whatever you prefer, Mr. Chair.
We'll rearrange the schedule as long as staff has no issue with it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Now you can ignore the voicemail I just left for you.
I never ignore your voices.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, would you like us to begin the housekeeping comments?
I sure would. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. Please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. Click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you are in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby. For meetings in other locations, please complete a blue speaker card and provide it to a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items, and times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. Word time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-3247. That's 909-396-3247. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you are authorizing recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
So good morning. I'd like to call to order today's hybrid mobile source committee meeting, and it's Friday, October 18th, 2024. Would staff please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem McAllen,
Here,
Supervisor Perez,
Here?
Councilmember Rahman absent, Councilmember Rodriguez,
Here.
Chair Krakov absent, and Acting Chair Supervisor Mitchell.
I'm present. And it sounds like we have a quorum. Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Happy Friday. We have 2 informational items on the agenda this morning. First, we'll take up agenda item number 1, which is our annual report on AB 2766 funds from the motor vehicle registration fees for fiscal year 2022-2023. And I believe Ms. White is going to give us our presentation.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Vicki White. I'm a manager here in our planning division. My presentation today is going to provide a program update. This is the AB 2766 Motor Vehicle Subvention Fund Program. And this program operates on an annual cycle. So this update will be for the fiscal year 2022-2023 period. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. The purpose of this report is to document the program activities that occurred in the preceding fiscal year. This report identifies, the project spending in that fiscal year, the projects that were implemented, as well as the program results, including emission reductions and other features of the program. Next slide, please. AB 2766 was adopted in 1990. It's intended to fund programs that reduce emissions from motor vehicles. It authorizes DMV to collect a $6 per vehicle surcharge on annual vehicle registration fees. So every vehicle in our South Coast Air Quality Management District, when they go to register, there is a $6 surcharge. That's the funding that I'm referring to here as part of their annual registration. So of those funds, $1.60 per vehicle comes to the Motor Vehicle Subvention Fund program, which is the program that I'm going to be presenting on today. This program has a total of 162 local governments. These are cities and counties that receive quarterly distributions based on their population share. These local governments have to document their spending and all of the projects that are funded using these funds in an annual report that gets submitted to the South Coast AQMD every year. And then we compile this information and produce a program level annual report. And that's what I'll be discussing today. Next slide, please. This slide shows the program highlights from the preceding fiscal year. As I mentioned, 162 cities and counties participating. In total, they spent close to $24 million in project spending. This includes a total of 344 projects that were implemented, of which 242 projects resulted in direct emission reduction benefits, what we refer to as quantifiable emission reduction projects. And these projects in total generated 101 tons per year of emissions reduced. And the entire funding allocation for the cities and counties in the prior fiscal year was $22.5 million. Next slide, please. Every year, the team engages in ongoing training and outreach with the cities and counties. Typically in January and February, at the beginning of each year, we do set up specific training sessions. And we encourage all of the cities and counties to attend these training sessions. Last fiscal year, we held 16 sessions. We had very good showing from all the cities and counties. In these training sessions, we're very specific on projects that we help them identify projects that are eligible. We talk about cost effectiveness, how to select projects with quantifiable emission reductions. And we also coordinate with our finance division. They attend these trainings as well to go over all of the accounting requirements for the program. We do encourage fund leveraging. This is a really good way. We point cities and counties in the direction of other funding sources that can be mixed and matched with these funds to enable the dollars to go further, get a bigger bang for the buck. And on an ongoing basis, we really are in close contact with the cities and counties. Our key role is providing technical assistance. A function that we have is to be a resource to the cities and counties. And we do often attend briefings or meetings with the Council of Government. Next slide, please. So for this program, there are 11 eligible project funding categories. They're listed here. I'm just going to briefly go over some of these. Alternative fuel electric vehicle purchases. This category actually includes infrastructure as well that's required to support these vehicles. Land use, that's an important feature here. It's any planning the cities or counties do that may be around mobile source emission reductions. Public transit is pretty clear. It's primarily situations where they're providing some sort of financial incentives for folks to, use public transportation. Any of the lines within their jurisdiction, transit, rail, bus, traffic management. This is primarily traffic calming measures. It includes signal synchronization, transportation demand management. I'll go into this in a little more detail. This is a very big project category for this program. It includes a lot of the cities and counties' efforts to incentivize ride sharing. It also includes telecommuting projects. This is a big category for this program. We have a category for bicycle-related projects, PM reduction strategies. These are primarily projects that reduce road dust, such as street sweeping, public education, a very important category for this program. And then we have a catch-all of miscellaneous projects. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the recent program history, the past 5 years, including the fiscal year in the bottom row that I'm discussing today. For fiscal year 2022-23, the orange highlighted row, the ending balance, so this is the ending balance at the beginning of the fiscal year, was 67.3 million. And then the motor vehicle fees that were dispersed to the cities and counties totaled 22.5 million. And then the next column over, project spending, this is, that 23.9 million number that was what the cities and counties spent in terms of projects being implemented. And then the ending balance at the end of the fiscal year is 66.6 million. This next column, pre-designated funds, is an important one for the program. So out of the, at the ending balance, the cities and counties are encouraged to plan ahead with these funds. So there is an expectation that they pre-designate the funds that they are being held in their fund account. So as you can see, 85% of the ending balance has already been pre-designated for future projects. So this is really a good indicator that they're planning ahead for future investments. And then the last column is just the funds that are remaining that have not yet been pre-designated for future use. Next slide, please. So this identifies, I mentioned previously there are 11 project categories. What we saw in the preceding fiscal year was that 9 of the 11 categories were used. And these are basically in order of project spending. So you can see the top 2, alternative fuels, electric vehicles category, which includes infrastructure as well as transportation demand management. That, is about 64% of the total project spending. And then the other categories are like traffic management comes next, and that includes a total of 344 projects that were implemented. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a little more detail on the projects that were implemented. The categories here that you see are actually in rank order based on emissions reduced. So you'll see transportation demand management. That's the category that includes a lot of ride sharing. Telecommuting is still a big category post-pandemic. A lot of that activity and those projects are being categorized under TDM. And this category includes 75% of the emissions reduced. Very big category for this program. And then the next, traffic management, is responsible for 10% of the emissions reduced, and so on. The last column there is the cost effectiveness level in dollars per ton. I wanted to mention that the figures you see here per category, that's an average for all of the projects that were funded within that category. So some of the projects can be lower or higher than that. This is the average cost effectiveness for the various projects funded in each of those categories. And you can see a range here that's actually typical for these types of projects. A lot of these projects are similar to what's funded through the federal congestion management air quality program, and these cost effectiveness numbers do align with some of those projects that are being funded through that program as well. Next slide, please.
I have a question first,
Oh, sure.
Madam Chair, if it's okay. Concerned about bicycles at $1.4 million. That seems pretty excessive, and I would hope they're putting their money elsewhere to achieve reductions rather than spending a lot of money that's not achieving much.
Yeah, this category is an eligible category, right? So any bike-related projects, this is a pretty important category for a lot of the cities, counties, as part of their mobility elements. But
I
yeah.
know it's pushed pretty heavily by SCAG, but it doesn't seem to be very cost effective.
Yeah, relative to the other projects within this program. So yeah, our role is, like I mentioned, a resource to the city so we can help them identify the cost effectiveness per, the methodology for this program. And, but ultimately the decision is theirs to make. Thank you. Next slide, please. And this slide just kind of recaps the emission reductions. We broke it out by county. So you can see the program does include 4 pollutants, NOx, PM10, reactive organic gases, as well as carbon monoxide. So the cost effectiveness numbers are based on the reductions of these 4 pollutants. LA County makes it to the top. It's based on the funding distributions based on population share. And the cities, counties, unincorporated areas in LA County, they do have the larger population. They receive more of the funds. So they have the ability to fund more projects. And that's why we're seeing higher emissions reduced in LA County, followed by Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino. Next slide, please. So next steps, we plan to submit the fiscal year 2022-23 annual report to CARB for their information. We will also post it on our website. And, this is an ongoing role that we have, continue to advise local governments on project eligibility, cost effectiveness. We are seeing a lot more of the funds being used for vehicle purchases, including zero emission vehicles, as well as supporting infrastructure. And telecommuting is still a big category for a lot of these agencies that are participating in the program. So thank you. With that, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you very much. Questions of committee members? I see one hand raised. Dr. Herr Johnson, is that you?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Perez and Councilmember Rodriguez have their hands raised.
Okay, well, that was weird. Okay, it was mixed up on my screen. All right, Supervisor Perez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you go back to that slide as to the breakdown of the counties? I think that's helpful
Slide 10.
to better understand. I guess, what does it say there? Let me see here.
Yeah, this is slide 10. That is a breakdown of the emissions reduced by county.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering, going back to the point by our mayor, Kellen, is concerned about bicycles. I'm wondering how this breaks down even further. For example, within Riverside County, let's say, or Orange County, what communities, what cities, and then even deeper than that, which are the programs that they're actually, reducing emissions, or which programs are more effective per se that are allowing us to reduce emissions on one front, and then on the other front, the funding that's actually going into these areas, how much is going where and for what specifically. I think that would be very helpful if we have that type of slide available.
Actually, those details are in the annual report. That's part of the package today. You'll see for every city and county, it'll show the project spending as well as the projects that are being implemented within those jurisdictions.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to take a look at it. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Kind of as a follow-up to that, can you tell me about the participation rates in the training seminars? I think to get to the supervisor's point is really making sure that all the cities and counties are receiving the technical assistance and are participating in the training. And so can you tell me what those participation rates are like?
Yeah, we do have high participation rates. Of course, there are some, I don't have the names here today, but there are some that did not participate. But we get a high attendance, and we also see multiple representatives from, individual cities, individual counties attend these training sessions. So, but also we are available, throughout the year, and we have close contact with them. they can reach out to us anytime to, get the support that they need.
Okay, it might behoove us as a board to know if there are cities in our areas that haven't participated. So perhaps we could go nudge and suggest that they might want to step up, that this is a great resource and great opportunity. So if we could be told those cities that are in our areas, I think that might be helpful. Councilman Rodriguez.
Good morning, Supervisor and colleagues. Thank you for the report. I just wanted to follow up on that slide and just clarify, in the annual report, does it also include the breakdown by county? On that slide, it lays out a sense of context on the cost-effective dollars per ton. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how we're performing county by county on that measurable. Do we have that information for future reference? The cost effectiveness dollars per ton. The mayor mentioned the $1.4 million relative to bicycles. I'm curious as to how the various projects perform county by county, just for my edification to understand that. But just to a more specific point, do we have a suite of best recommended practices that we have available to share with the cities as we look at, and maybe you could highlight a few just from the standpoint of the projects, the 131 projects on alternative fuel, electric vehicle projects. Are there any that stand out that we could promote and highlight as a practice for the cities to be thinking about? Similarly, when we see the amount of, in fact, the biggest bang for our buck, are we leaning into sharing that type of information? Ultimately, you make the point, it's up to the cities to decide, but do we provide that type of guidance and insight so that they can have some context about, look at these cities, here's what they've done, these are the more popular types of programs, you might want to consider that in your city. It does provide this ratio of dollars per ton. Just providing them that context. Can you help us understand a little bit about that information availability? And lastly, really would encourage and invite an update of that type of information I just alluded to at the Council of Governments meetings. And we could start with OCCOG as to kind of giving them a sense of, as you're getting ready to utilize your funds, be thinking about these types of programs. Thank you.
On the cost effectiveness question, I don't believe we break that down by county. We probably could attempt to do that analysis, but cost effectiveness is really on a project by project basis. What we show here in the presentation is, we calculated the cost effectiveness for individual projects, and then we categorized it for these categories, and then we took an average for all the projects that were funded within that category. So a breakdown by county, I don't know how useful, but I think your point about looking at, providing more information to the cities and counties on the cost effectiveness of the different types of projects that are eligible. That's something we could probably, beef up our training to help them understand that. And there, CARB also puts out guidance on this that we incorporate as part of our training. So there's several guidance documents that we can help them with as well.
Any projects stand out?
I think
Best of the best that you'd like to share with us today that come to mind?
the transportation demand management category, that's a big category. We're still seeing a fair amount of telecommuting post-pandemic that's being used here. And the ride-sharing programs, they're not very innovative perhaps, but they do provide a lot of emission reductions. A lot of those strategies result in a direct reduction in vehicle trips. So those tend to do very well in a program like this. I think that's probably all I can say. This is an annual program. We are seeing, actually, what's very interesting trend right now is we're seeing more interest in zero emission vehicle purchases and infrastructure, especially on the infrastructure side. We're seeing a lot more of this funding going into charging stations at the city and county locations. So that's actually a really good thing to see happening. We're getting a lot more questions asked about those types of projects. Of course, they involve a long lead time for planning, so we're helping cities understand that they can accumulate. If they receive small amount of this funding, they can accumulate with time so that they have a bigger budget for projects like that. Those are kinds of assistance that we provide. I hope that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to
Thank
hear
you.
more.
Appreciate it. I think we're one of the cities in Yorba Linda that just tries to accumulate the funds, and then we've invested those into a number of electric vehicles and our effort to have a mix of fleet change for our city vehicles. So thank you for the update.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
thank
Mr.
you very
Mayor.
much. I know 10 to 12 years ago, we had a couple of bad actors that were spending the money on projects that weren't eligible. Do we have any currently?
There were findings. The last fiscal audit was done, the financial audit for this program is done every 2 years biannually. The last one did have some findings with cities and counties. My understanding is that a lot of those were more accounting errors and not misspending. I think there may have been one city that we had to work with more closely to help, perhaps remove funds and reallocate the funds. But for the most part, I think it's like over 99% of the cities and counties and the dollars that are being spent according to the program requirements.
Well, that's good. And I think the education program or AQMD's involvement in educating the cities on how they can use the funds is very helpful to prevent that kind of spending of the money in projects that aren't eligible. Certainly helps. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, let's go ahead and have public comment on agenda item number 1, please.
There are no commenters in the room on this item. And I don't see
Okay,
any.
thank you very much. You said none in the room?
Correct, none on the room, and I don't see any hands raised on Zoom either.
Okay, great. I don't have any members of the public here. Do any board members have members of the public where you are? No. Great. This is informational and no vote will be taken. Thank you very much to the staff. Let's move on to agenda item number 2, which is our warehouse actions and investments to reduce emissions, the WARE program, again, an annual report. Ian McMillan will give us our staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair. My name is Ian McMillan. I'm here to talk about our WARE program, and actually Vicki could have done a very good job on this too, but we decided to split up the duties today. So let's go to the next slide. So this is going to be our second annual report that we're reporting to the board. We've had interim status updates along the way as well, but this is the official annual report for the second one anyway. The AB 2766 program is quite routine. We report on that every year. We're getting there with this program, but this is kind of an interesting report here. Of course, this rule is designed to reduce NOx and diesel particulate matter emissions associated with warehouses, regional and local benefits from that. And it's really looking at just the largest warehouses. Next slide. This is the too long, didn't read version of the entire presentation. So we're in our 3rd year of implementation. This really is an innovative rule. And why I want to highlight that is that industry is learning, we are learning. We are growing this program and we're seeing steady progress along the way. So we're on that journey to make this a very common program, but it's very innovative right now. Warehouses are continuing to submit their reports, and those that do submit their reports and are part of the program are finding it feasible. They are over complying. So that's really, really good. That said, we're continuing to work on the compliance rates. I'll talk about that in this presentation. We are seeing benefits of this rule, both in direct emission reductions and in creating that ecosystem of clean technologies and new business models to get those cleaner vehicles out there. So let's go to the next slide. In all of our annual reports, we do a little tiny snapshot of just, what's the state of the warehousing industry in our region. So the graph on the left, there's tiny little dots, but that blue line is the warehousing space in our region, and the red line is the number of buildings in our region. And you see that vertical line is when the rule was adopted. And we see that continued growth of warehousing in our region. Warehousing industry in our region is incredibly robust, and that is continuing to be that way. We're seeing continued growth. At the same time, we have seen in this last year a post-pandemic shifting of the warehousing market. But what we're experiencing here locally is really being experienced all across the nation as there's a shift from goods to services, that the demand for warehousing has gone down. Rents have gone down across the board, across the nation. Vacancies have climbed up a little bit, but our region continues to have highest rents, some of the lowest vacancies. So it really is still a shining jewel of warehousing in the country. So we still have a very robust market. Next slide. I'm going to blast through these 3 slides coming up next here. Just overall, the rule, it's phased in through time. We're just starting phase 3 right now. Largest buildings first, smallest buildings last. Next slide. One of the key features of this rule is annual reporting. And so there's an initial one-time report from owners in blue. That's the warehouse operations notification. That tells us about the tenants in the building and basics about the building itself. The yellow one is the initial site information report. That's a one-time report from operators. They tell us about their operations and how they plan to comply with the rule. And then the green ones, those are repeated. Every year we get that from the operator. And those are really the key reports we're looking at. What actions were taken to comply with the rule itself? So that those annual WARE reports are what we're going to focus a lot on here. Next slide. Just basically, this is a menu-based point system rule. So every year they count their warehouse operator counts their truck trips. That determines their compliance obligation, how many points they need to earn. They can then earn those points off of a whole menu of options that are available. And then they report on that to us every single year. Next slide. Okay, I want to spend a little time here. We're going to have a lot of numbers coming in later slides here. So I want to talk a little bit about the warehousing universe. So the chart on the left, the blue one, shows warehouse buildings. We get a lot of this data originally from a commercial database that's available for the kind of real estate brokers and those markets. And so that dark part of that blue that's where we're getting that commercial data. However, that data base is not really designed for our rules. So there's a little bit of extra warehouses that aren't in that database that we do actually get reporting to us. So that's showing the total number of buildings. That the light part is the only reported to us. And so we're tracking all of those buildings. At the same time, some of these buildings are multi-tenant. So the number of operators subject to the rule, that's in yellow. And so we see that there's a lot more operators than there are buildings. And a lot of these operators, they have short-term leases, maybe just a few years. And so they're moving in, they're moving out. There's just a lot of tracking that we have to do here. Not all of those operators need to earn points. So we see from the reporting we have so far, about 19% of operators, they need to provide basic information to us because from the outside, it looks like a warehouse, but you get inside there, maybe it's just a manufacturing facility or some other operation that they're exempt from the rule, but they just have exempt from earning points, but they still have to provide basic information to us, who's their contact information, basically what they're doing, and then that's it. So there's just a lot of tracking that happens here. These are relatively large numbers. We have about 28,000 permitted facilities in all the regulated facilities that we have. Most of these warehouses are not permitted. They don't get permits through this program. They don't have permits for any other reason. So on a one-time basis with all this reporting, you could say maybe it's a 33% increase in the number of facilities that we handle. It's just a lot of resources that the district is putting towards making sure we're getting compliance here. On an ongoing basis, it's about an increase of about 15% because we have these ongoing reports. Next slide. This chart here shows the yellow bar on the right from the last one. So it's looking at the total number of operators, how many are in single tenant buildings, how many are in multi-tenant buildings, and then the different colors show the different phases. It's roughly evenly distributed there, but just to give you a sense of it. I mentioned before just this data handling. As you can see, I'm showing some relatively simple splits of the data. There's a lot of data that we have. All of the reports come to us electronically through a web platform that was developed and is continuing to be enhanced. So we try to get all that data in electronically, but just the data management side of this, handling all that data, analyzing it, doing all of the auditing, it's a significant amount of work just to make sure we know which operators in which building at what time, what are their actions, which report, et cetera, to make sure that the compliance, we can follow up on all that. So just a significant effort, just the sheer scale of this. Next slide. All right, so I want to talk about some of the results from the reporting. So this is the initial site information report. Again, this is that one-time report of how they plan to comply. A lot of colors shown here. Each color represents a different action. You see the legend there. The different bars are phases 1, 2, and 3. And so we see that phase 1 is much higher than phase 2, which is a little higher than phase 3. Really, this reflects the reporting rates. And I'm going to talk on that in a little bit. But we had higher reporting rates for phase 1. Phase 2 and phase 3 are still going to be increasing through time on this. But what we see is that there's a kind of a wide spread that we have a menu of options, and we put that menu out there because there's different business models, different options work for different warehouses, and that's okay. And so we see that that's really reflected here. Some of these pop out a little bit more. That dark blue at the bottom, zero emission hostlers, we'll see those again. We also see zero emission infrastructure installation and usage. That's the dark green. We see some interest there. The last one I'll highlight is the purple. That's mitigation fees. There are not many warehouses that plan to use mitigation fees, and we'll see later that not many are actually using it. It is used, it is an option, but it's not all that common. Next slide. Okay, so this is looking now at the annual WARE reports. This is again that sort of, in my view, the most important report to see what kind of actions are actually occurring. And so just at the first level, this is a little confusing at first, but I just want to walk folks through it. So the dark blue that we see about 52,000 for 2022 in phase 1, about 100,000 for 2023 phase 1. That's the number of points total that warehouses had to earn that reported to us. We see that 2023 is about double 2022. That's because the rule, as it's phased in, tightens through time. So we expect that there would be about a doubling there if it's the same number of warehouses. The orange and the green show how many points were actually earned. And you see that they are over-earning relative to their compliance obligation. And the green is a mitigation fee, and that is a small fraction of the total points earned. With these extra points that are earned, they can bank those for future years. They can also transfer them to other facilities that they operate. So there is a value to over-earning, but the rule does get tighter through time. What we're seeing in phase 2, again, the reporting rates are much lower there right now. They just had their 1 year of reporting, but we still see the same phenomenon, that they're over-earning relative to what they are actually reporting as their obligation. Okay, next slide. This is the same data, but shown in a slightly different way. This is, again, this multicolor, as every color is a different option in the menu for how to select it. We see the zero emission hostlers are the most popular item here, followed by near zero emission truck visits. That's natural gas, low NOx engine truck visits. Zero emission infrastructure and usage. One thing I do want to note, we reported a very similar slide to this back in March. The committee asked us to come back and do a little update right after that reporting season ended. So the deadline for reporting was January 31st. We took a couple weeks, compiled everything, and put a slide together, but we knew when we were reporting that, and we mentioned at the time that we needed to do some auditing. Some of the numbers looked a little off from some of the facilities. And sure enough, we went back and we've had some time to go do some of that auditing. And it's some errors that were putting the decimal in the wrong spot kind of thing. But there was a number of those. About 250,000 points have been taken off the ledger here. So we knew at the time that there were some issues with that. Part of the reason we now want to keep the annual report on a fall cycle is to give us that time to do that first scrub and make sure that we have a good handle on the data. So we feel pretty good about this. It might change as we continue to do audits through time, but we feel a lot better about what we're presenting here compared to in March. Next slide. Emission reductions, of course, are a big part of this. So we see zero emission hostlers, again, are a very more popular item, and that's where we get a lot of the emission reductions. They give actually a little bit more bang for the buck when it comes to that diesel particulate matter, that localized benefit. Those hostlers are the cargo handling equipment that stays on site. And so we see some emission reductions there. This slide has also been revised since March, again, reflecting that difference in points. We see overall about a 0.9, just under 0.9 tons per day of NOx emission reductions in 2023. This is still within the range of what we predicted in the rule. It's getting towards a little bit more on the lower end, but again, we're expecting that to continue to increase as compliance increases. Next slide. So this slide, it's kind of a funny one. It's just a bunch of numbers, but I'll say that we actually have a lot of different entities all throughout the country reach out to us. And this is the most popular slide. Everybody looks at this slide, everybody talks about it. And the reason for it, and we've shown this in the past, is that it's really, you say, well, how much charger usage? 23 gigawatt hours have been reported because of this program. Zero emission infrastructure energization, 339 chargers, and these are typically truck chargers. It's starting to scale, and these would not have happened but for this rule. And so it's starting to really scale this ecosystem and really seeing how does zero emissions come into play. It's not just through funding, which is critically important, but there's other mechanisms to do this. And so it's compiling all of this data together. It's something that we plan to continue to do, and it will continue to increase through time. Next slide. One of the
Excuse
things
me,
that we've also seen is there's
Ian,
this ecosystem. I'm
On
sorry.
that last slide, what does the
You go
star
back.
mean on the hydrogen thing?
The hydrogen dispensed, let me see here, that star. I apologize, I think that might be a typo. I think we originally had a footnote and we pulled it out. I think originally it's because it's kilograms and we didn't know kilograms, and so we put it in there. So, apologize. Okay, so one of the things that we've done, there's sort of the broad ecosystem across, thousands of warehouses and all the actions that they're taking. One of the things that we expected from this rule is that there could be some new business models that emerge, and this rule is trying to facilitate those new business models. I'm highlighting one here of looking at charging infrastructure. So this is a site that actually there is no warehouse at this site, but it's very close to other warehouses. And what they've done is they've installed a giant truck charging station, 96 chargers that all those trucks can be charged simultaneously at 150 kilowatts or more. And those trucks then go to warehouses subject to the rule. They submitted a custom plan to us. This is Prologis and Maersk submitted a custom plan application to us. We reviewed it under the criteria in the rule, and we said, yep, looks good, approved. And they are now able to earn points for the installation of all these chargers that can be applied to the other warehouses where these trucks are going. They get charged here, but then they go to warehouses. This site is also a little unique in that, like many other sites that are going large-scale charging, infrastructure from the grid can be a long, lengthy process. This particular one has linear generators, so they're currently off-grid. They will get tied to the grid eventually, but right now they're off-grid. So this is a new, different kind of business model. The idea that, hey, we can actually set up this separate site, and there's sort of these different relationships that are coming in of businesses working with each other to facilitate this, and the rule allows it and gives credit for it and actually incentivizes it. Next slide. Switching over to the mitigation fee program, we are collecting mitigation fees, just shy of about $30 million collected so far. This map shows where the warehouses are that have paid into the fee. The darker colors represent where we've collected more fees. We are going to turn this around. We haven't spent any of these mitigation fees yet. We are going to turn this around and spend the funds right back in those same areas that you see there. So for number 34, those funds are going to go right back to area 34 in the same area and county where those funds were collected. Use it for things like trucks and charging infrastructure. We do have a public process we plan to undertake before spending those fees. We've held off a little bit. There was a few things pending, for example, litigation, EPA approval, et cetera, that we wanted to get through. We're now through all those. I'll talk about those in a bit. We are looking to start spending these funds next year. The climate pollution reduction grant that we recently received has a significant community engagement piece to it. We think we might be able to dovetail nicely with that, with what the board directed us to do on community engagement before spending these fees, tied into those kinds of programs. So we want to be able to efficiently get this program underway. All of this is going to come back to Tech Committee, where most of our grant programs go.
Could you have a county overlay on this so we know by county where it's being spent?
Yes, so this is collected right now. So you can actually, the little areas here actually also match county boundaries. So for example, San Bernardino County would be 33, 34, 35, 32, as well as the mountain areas. Great. Next slide. Okay, I'd like to report or talk about the reporting progress right now. And so one of the challenges is, and with a brand new program that's innovative, this is different for a lot of warehouses. And so it's taken them some time to ramp into this, and we're going to continue to see improvement through time. But what's shown, I'm going to go through the bar chart on the left first. So phase one, you see the red dashed line, 1,408 operators. Is our estimate of how many operators would need to earn points. And we've gotten between 40 and 45% reporting so far for those annual WARE reports, the AWRs, that's the annual WARE reports. And that's been increasing through time. We see that chart on the right with the blue line shows when we get reports. And so you see that in early 2023, we got an initial pulse, a big spike. That's the reporting deadline. Like all programs, wait till the last minute to turn in your homework. And so we normally expect a spike right there. But then it's been steadily increasing ever since. And that steady increase, what we've been seeing is those reports are coming in late. And we have compliance efforts underway on that, but the outreach we're doing, the compliance efforts we're doing, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, we're seeing that steady increase through time. We don't expect to see future spikes. And part of the reason is that when a facility is notified they're late, they don't get to just flip a switch and suddenly they can comply. They have to take actions. Those actions can take some time. So we're expecting this to continually, steadily increase through time, but we need to keep doing a lot of work to get those numbers up to where they need to be. Going back to the bar chart, we see phase two. There is nothing reported for 2022. They weren't required to file any reports in 2022. 2023 was their very first year, even lower reporting rates there. We're working our way through this universe. Next slide. There's a lot of outreach that we do on this, and we started from the very beginning. It was hampered a little bit early on. This rule was adopted during the pandemic. A lot of our in-person site visits had to wait a little bit to get out of the pandemic. We did a lot of outreach before then and continue to do it as well. Lots of mailers have gone out. I'll highlight here 10,000 plus calls and emails. That's not robocalls. That's not bulk emails. That is one by one, we get an inquiry and we're responding to a specific question and providing that assistance. Lots of visits to our website, training videos. We do a lot of presentations out in the public, going to trade associations, trade shows, et cetera. So almost 150 of those at this point. And then I'll highlight on the very bottom, 3,400 plus warehouse operators have been visited at this point. There's been a really big push on that over the last year in particular from our compliance division, doing a lot of really good work, getting out there, knocking on doors to really make sure the industry knows about this rule and what they need to do. Next slide. So looking at our compliance and enforcement activities, this really kickstarted last fall with a compliance advisory that went out to pretty much our entire universe saying, hey, there's this rule and you need to comply with it. Since that time, there's been several waves of notices of violation that have been issued to warehouse operators who haven't submitted their reports to us yet. There's 377 shown here on the slide. Each wave has been issued at a different time over the past year. In fact, there's another wave that isn't shown here. I guess wave 5, might call it, based on the slide. That would be about another 100 went out this week. So we're seeing these NOVs continuing to go out. And as I'd mentioned before, it's not like someone gets to turn on a switch and suddenly they get into compliance. There's going to be a process to get them to get into compliance. And so what we're seeing on wave 1, not quite 90% are now resolved, where they've now finally submitted their report, or for whatever reason, they have provided new information that says they're exempt or something like that. Wave 2, we're working through wave 2, 3, 4, 5 are going to keep coming next. So we're steadily making progress through all of these. We're going to continue our enforcement efforts. We need to get those reporting rates up. It needs to be a level playing field for all of the facilities. We know that those that are in the program already have found it feasible to comply. We need to make sure everybody is doing their part.
Quick
And
question, are those numbers based on the 43% that have participated and submitted the reports? These are the findings of NOVs for those.
the 43% on the previous slide or 2 slides ago was showing the entire universe. This subset of NOVs would be those that had not submitted. Some of that 43% includes those that have been resolved, that we've added that in. So maybe originally the percentage was 41 or 42% or whatever it was, and it's been climbing through time in part due to these NOVs.
So if they didn't participate on that other slide, 57% who have not, are they receiving a NOV?
Yes, we're working through that to look at all those that have not submitted the reports and taking appropriate compliance action.
And that's what these waves represent in part?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, next slide. Just a little bit, this is sort of the, looking at the compliance assistance, similar to some of the outreach slide, we see that we do a lot of these, responses and phone calls and emails. There's pulses of this. You see January, I guess when the reporting deadline is, it's in January. So we're expecting this upcoming January, all hands on deck to really help industry do what they need to do to comply with this rule. Next slide. Next. There's been a few things that have happened that are sort of related to this rule. First, I'll mention here, just last week, EPA's final rule became effective, approving 2305 into the SIP. We did expect this when we adopted the rule. It's taken EPA a bit of time to put all the analysis together to go ahead and approve it, but they finally did, and they approved it exactly how we anticipated as a SIP strengthening measure. And so, for example, in their rule, they identify some relatively minor deficiencies, but we knew about it, saying that this rule can't be credited specifically for emission reductions into the SIP. So for example, if we get 3 tons per day eventually of emission reductions that we think are coming from this rule, for a variety of reasons, that doesn't get put directly into the SIP attributable to the rule. However, those emission reductions are included in the SIP and other measures, for example, through inventory analysis or through other that might be accredited to other regulations or to incentive programs. It's given credit elsewhere in the SIP. The emission reductions are real. They're actually happening. They're accounted for in the SIP. We just can't point to 2305 and say that caused it. So next slide. There's also a recent bill that was just actually signed by the governor this last legislative session, AB 98. It's gotten a lot of discussion lately. This is largely a bill related to land use agencies and how they're doing building design standards, general plans, truck routes. And so there's a lot, most of the bill is really addressing that and looking at, how to try to make logistics uses be a good neighbor to communities. I think that's what the bill is seeking to do. A lot of the building design standards, not a lot, some of the building design standards cross over into the menu items. And so I think there's been a little bit of confusion on some of this, that, for example, if solar panels are required to be installed because of this rule, can they then still earn points under the rule? Yes, you can. There is no conflict there. What our rule says is that if there's a regulation by EPA, CARB, or ourselves that requires something in the menu, then you can't earn those points. You have to go beyond other regulations. However, there are other requirements that are state law or local requirements that have some requirement there. That's okay. You can double up on that. So if there's solar panels required because of AB 98, you can earn points for using those solar panels. If there's charging stations required because of AB 98, you can then earn points under the rule, and that's totally fine. Where there are some things that raised some concerns for us, this bill was raised at the last minute, and so we didn't really get an opportunity to weigh in. There was a study that's called for in here that's looking at mobile monitoring over a 6-year period, as well as a follow-on modeling study to evaluate air pollution. The scope that's laid out in the bill is quite substantial. We really are still scoping it out. I mean, we first heard about this when the bill language became live 3 days before the end of the session. And what we're really trying to just scope it out, but it's millions of dollars. It's going to be a substantial effort. It is subject to appropriation. I don't think I've heard of any appropriation on this as of yet, but we're paying attention to this part of it. And then the last bit is that it also introduces a new public process for any penalty fees that we get or any penalties that we get in response to the NOVs. Before the governing board can spend those, we need to do a public process to engage the community, get their input, to then provide that input to the board before they can spend those fees. This is new. I'm not aware of any other regulation that has this.
I just wanted to add that
Let me
we will
get a
be
quick
looking at cleanup legislation with regards to AB 98, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to note that we will be looking at cleanup legislation for the new session to address the concerns that Mr. McMillan just expressed.
Well, and my follow-up question was going to be, kind of the poison pill, often subject to appropriation. And if the bill, was at the end of session, it was outside of the budget process. And so I guess the real question is if there will be a move on the administration's part or the author of the bill to try to get dollars appropriated through the budget process to pay for it. Because if not, I guess the whole thing is a moot point, or what portion of the bill was subject to appropriation? Do we know that?
What I'm referring to here is the appropriation language is specific to this study, that this study must be conducted subject to appropriation.
Got it. All right. But your strategy in terms of legislative cleanup deals with everything that impacts AQMD, correct, Wayne?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll keep going. Last slide. So just moving forward, what's next? We're going to, of course, continue our compliance efforts, looking at phase 1 and phase 2, continue to outreach to phase 3. That phase 3 reports are due January 31st, 2025. So we're in that calendar year right now where they need to take actions anytime during this year, but report to us end of January 2025. Continue to do our auditing and review as like with any program. Our WarePop reporting software, that's a very good reporting software that we have right now, but with all software, continued enhancements to it. We're going to keep working on that. And then, as I mentioned, there's a lot of data management that we're doing. We want to get that available on Find. We do a lot of public records requests that we provide this data, but there's business confidentiality concerns there. Trying to figure out how to do this more automated in a bulk way. We're still working on that along with everything else. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much. Quick question from me. First of all, I acknowledge all the hard work. I mean, the slide that shows the 3,400 in-person visits is very impressive, so thank you. And I'm hoping that we can get these compliance percentages, the rates included in our monthly written reports on a go-forward basis, just so we can continue to track the progress. I'm curious about the reporting rates. You had a slide, there were a couple of questions, and I understand the waves of kind of distributing the notices of violation. I guess I would have expected more of a jump from those efforts. Do you have a sense of if there are folks who are deliberately non-complying versus they just don't know about the requirements yet? Do you have a concern that it's willful?
Whenever you have such a high non-compliance rate, you should have those concerns. I think what we've been finding is that there are a number of people who don't believe that they need to submit either the initial reports because their operations don't comport with the warehouse operations. So each of these notifications requires an extensive amount of follow-up. And in part, that takes a lot of our resources. And that's why the time to address these and resolve these is very time consuming. If we were trying to do like a 500 blitz, if you will, of compliance, it would overwhelm our legal, our inspectors, and our other groups. So that's why we've been approaching it in this batch type process. But the one main component, Supervisor, that I think you allude to is sort of economic benefit. No one should have a greater economic benefit, particularly through noncompliance. And so part of what we're hoping is that as we try to get word out amongst the press, through industry organizations, that, you know, we are looking at these things and that these things will definitely come back to roost on your doorstep, so to speak, when it comes to settlement of these penalties.
I appreciate that. Mayor McCallum, I've got to step away for just a couple of minutes to take a call. I hope that you'll be willing to finish out for me the rest of this meeting. But one more question before I step away. Which category of action has the largest emissions reductions per wear points earned?
I think right now what we're seeing, it's on the one of these slides that shows the emission reductions, that it's the zero emission hostlers, I think, is where we're really seeing a lot of benefit, both on the NOx side and on the diesel particulate matter side.
Thank you for that. Mayor McCallum, will you take it from here for me, please?
I'm glad to do that. Thank you, Supervisor. I have a question. If we can go back to slide 13. To me, what I'm mainly concerned about is the emission reductions that we receive on this program. And this is an interesting chart. It shows, you said that this is the reductions are going in accordance to what you thought it was going to be. It would be useful to me to see how this is trending towards what we ultimately think we're going to achieve out of this program. And do you know what those numbers are?
Yeah, when we brought this rule to board at the time, we said when it's finally phased in, we expected 1.5 to 3 tons. Really depends on which options are chosen, but we expected about 1.5 to 3 tons
Per day.
per day of NOx.
And it would be useful to me to see a chart that tracks it by time against what we think we're supposed to be getting.
Okay.
Also, be interested to know the mitigation fees, how much we're receiving. You've got a chart that shows by area. I'd like to know how much dollar amounts we're getting by area if we could.
I'm sorry, you wanted the total? The total is 29.7 million total at this to date. And we, I think, have that on slide 16.
It'd be nice to know by breakout by those areas that you identified.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, we do have that in the annual report, I believe itself, the breakdown in there. That map shows the color coding. So for example, the darkest colors are more than 5 million, but we have the details in the report itself.
Okay, but it'd be interesting having the numbers on a chart or something.
Okay.
Just a visual. Any other comments? Go ahead, Carlos.
I think the supervisor had his hand up first, so.
I didn't see that. Supervisor, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering, and it seems like we're making good progress over the course of time, but yet there's still an upheaval and there's still a lot of demand to not support the build out of warehouses. Obviously, it's the mobile sources that are going to these warehouses and dropping off or taking items with them elsewhere. So I'm just kind of wondering, where's the balance here? And if we're making progress when it comes to reductions of greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, is this something maybe more like on the issue of zoning? and planning and where these warehouses are actually going. Maybe, there needs to be some sort of discussion. I don't know if that would be us, probably not. But a discussion as to where these warehouses can go, since there is progress going on and it's going to continue to advance, it seems like. Where is this balance? And so I think that's just a thought that came to my mind, and I'm not saying you have to answer that question now, but potentially maybe we need to start thinking about where these warehouses are actually permitted and built, and potentially using this data to go to the cities, to counties, to let them know this is what's going on. And that's the reason why there's so many folks potentially that are not happy because they're in their backyard. So where else can we actually build these or allow these to get built, since they are reducing greenhouse gas emissions? If that makes any sense.
Thank you, Supervisor. Land use designations is pretty sacrosanct amongst the cities and the counties. And typically what we do is we look at the emissions. We don't look at the land use designation. I think this information reflects the board's desire to reduce emissions associated with these type of facilities. And we have the information and we can certainly speak to that. But that's to the extent that I would recommend that we engage on this issue.
Well, I agree, we have this information, but to the extent that we engage, I think that we need to educate and outreach to the cities as well and let them know, look, this is what's going on.
Absolutely.
I don't see no problem with us providing that information to them. It'd be up to the cities now, because then at the end of the day, you have folks that are organizing at AQMD for the wrong reasons. They got to go over there, talk to the county officials. They got to go there, talk to the city officials, because we're doing our job.
Yes, we are.
So that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, we can do a lot of the communications of these kind of efforts through the COGS. I know that many of the board members actively engage with those organizations and talk about the results. But this is an area that I see as a good opportunity for sharing that information. Then we'll look at other things that could be done to increase the outreach so that the land use agencies know.
Yeah, okay. I was just thinking out loud about all that.
Yeah, thank you.
Carlos?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to dovetail into the point the supervisor just made, and seems to me that you have the information on every facility that is not in compliance. So is there a way perhaps to collaborate with the cities, what you just mentioned in the COG, and each member there receiving maybe some individual information? Here are facilities in your city. Can we work with you? And similarly at SCAG, here are every SCAG member receive information saying, here are the facilities in your community. We'd like to collaborate with you to see how we can work towards compliance. So that type of touch and integration of your efforts for 3,000 plus visits, coupled with working with the cities, I think could help move that needle. So I'd be interested in hearing at another date, maybe some recommendations on how we can work with the cities in closer concert. Could we go real quickly back to slide 14? Because I'm just wanting to understand those different lists of projects that were listed, and how does that, in the grand scheme of what is presented here, and compliance. This is a reflection of compliance and impact and actions that have been taken. What's the ratio of what's in front of us here versus the $29.7 million collected. So is that instance where a facility didn't do any of these types and then just paid a fee instead?
No, there's a lot of different factors that go into this. So as Ian had described, the first round of violations really sort of focuses on the reporting aspect. And so we haven't even gotten into the requirements that are necessary once we're reporting. You know, the whole enforcement issue is very complex, and it's very fluid and very dynamic. And as I said before, sometimes we find that the operators who didn't report, who would initially think they're out of compliance, either upon inspection, they have actually smaller space. It may not necessarily be warehouse space. So all of these things are very complex and not necessarily easily shared, particularly when we're still in the process of the enforcement program. And as you know, we don't typically share enforcement actions or data until our actions are complete. So it'd be very difficult to move forward in active, ongoing investigations and processes. But I think from a summary basis, like a year look, that's something that we can certainly provide. You know, all this information is publicly available, so we can look at other ways of trying to provide information to communities, cities, on an annualized basis, but not necessarily with regards to ongoing enforcement action.
So were each of these aware menu categories, so their points were received for each of these actions?
Yes.
Okay. So were there this type of activity that's occurring? Do we have a coinciding that's where the other slide had the amount of NOx reductions at 0.86? It was below the 1.5. It was about half of what we had expected.
Yeah.
We're making great progress, I heard, but I didn't know we were short of that figure 1.5 to, is it 1.5 to 3 million tons per day?
Yeah, we are expecting at final phase in, which would be after year 5, that we would be getting about 1.5 to 3 tons per day. There is a range here. You know, what would we be after year 2? We didn't really give precise numbers. You know, looking at sort of the phase in, what we thought on the rule, it's probably on the order of about 0.7 to 1.5 maybe in year 2. You know, so and each one of these, not everything that's shown on this slide is going to get you an emission reduction. Acquiring a truck doesn't give you any emission reductions. Using the truck does, right? So there's a lot of things here that we have that we, again, are building out that ecosystem, but that action on its own doesn't get you emission reductions.
So final question is, when we look at the program, how much activity would we say, if we were putting a ratio 50-50, 70-30, just when you have a sense of where compliance is on these type of activities in front of us versus collecting the fee? What's the frequency, or as far as what's happening? Because I'm seeing the 29.7 million, then I'm seeing this. So there's lots of activity happening, both in what we're seeing on the slide, and then we have almost $30 million collected. So how do we, I'm trying to understand just where those two converge as far as activity, and do we see much more on-site type of compliance like slide 14 versus the fee? Can you put a number on that, a ratio, so we can kind of get a sense of what's happening on the compliance front?
Yes, so we switched over to slide 12 here to show, this shows all of the actions, all the points earned for every action. And you see the purple, it's a little bit on the right there that you can see on 2022 and
Okay.
2023. That's about overall mitigation fees are 3 to 4% of all points earned. So it's there, it's an option, but it's by far outweighed by all of the other actions in the rule.
The purple is what would constitute 29.7 million?
Correct.
Okay. And then the total bars would be that 0.86 number that we had on the other slide. As far
Correct.
as-
Many of these actions we don't include in that total for emission reductions. So if you go down one slide. I'm sorry, the other way. Yeah, on this one. So you'll see that only a handful of menu options are shown here, those that get you direct emission reductions. But, installing a charger doesn't directly give you emission reduction. So that's not included on this total.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments from committee members, I'll go to public comment. Is there any public comment here?
We have 4 speaker cards.
Okay, would you call for the comment?
Sure. First up is Jesse Marquez. And next up will be Whitney Amaya. And Chair, I'll mention here that we have 7 speaker cards in total for this item, and then also 3 more for public comment. And for the, we have 15 minutes left here, and I know we have stationary at 10:30. I don't know if we want to visit the speaker
Limit
time.
comments to 1.5 minutes. If you would line up in the order you've been called. Go ahead, first speaker.
Jesse Marquez, Coalition for a Safe Environment. I am here to applaud the great accomplishment of this rule and the progress it is making. And so a kudo to all the staff that have worked hard and to all the committees and board members that, have believed in that the public can provide a lot of public comment that will enhance a rule so that it can be a very effective thing. Yes, we're in a new generation of technologies which are opening doors, but so far, wherever new technologies have been introduced, they have been a success. Comments that I have concerns is that I don't recall or have heard what happens if there's a change of ownership in a warehouse or distribution center, whereas they may not be aware of all the rules and regulations and will therefore not comply or do the minimum. So I want that to be an item that can be addressed and come back to us. Oftentimes too, a company operates or a corporation operates more than one company at a warehouse. So I want to make sure that, when board and staff are talking to each other and talking to the public saying that this warehouse by this company, there could actually be 4 companies in that same address, in that same building. So I would like to have that addressed. The other thing too that we have in concerns of warehouses is not only their location.
Thank you for your comments. Next, and who's to follow?
Next is Whitney Amaya, and then after that, Thurl Golden.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. My name is Whitney Amaya. I'm a community member from West Long Beach and a member of Eastern Communities for Environmental Justice. So thank you so much for the presentation and the update on the warehouse ISR. I'm, like I mentioned, from West Long Beach. We have a lot of diesel trucks running through our neighborhoods, the ICTF rail yard and dirty trains, and warehouses as well that have gone up really quick. And with that brought even more trucks into my neighborhood. However, because this agency listened to our communities in adopting this warehouse ISR, I'm actually starting to see zero emission trucks, right? And so I'm already seeing how this ISR is working to improve the air quality in my neighborhood. But I want to remind you that we need more work. As I was driving this morning on the 605, it was really shocking to see that it's become more and more like the 710. Full of heavy duty trucks. And so I want to remind you, one, why it's important for you to keep doing this work, right, in terms of cleaning the air quality, but also because my neighbors, my family, my community, your fellow human beings are literally breathing in toxic air that's killing us. And while right now we're the ones that are feeling these impacts, soon it's going to be you, right? I'm already seeing how these communities are transitioning into becoming communities like mine. And so I'm asking that.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next.
Next, we have Thurl Golden, followed by Mark Lopez.
Good morning. My name is Thurl Golden. I'm a resident of West Long Beach, a member of West Long Beach Association. And the report today was encouraging to see that we are moving forward, but we are still living in the most toxic part of Los Angeles County. And there's another major issue that has to be addressed also. The fees from this rule should equal to the cost to the public or to health impacts. We need to make sure that the economic gain is not on the burden of the backs of the people of the neighborhoods. We are the ones suffering. We're the ones dying. Yet and still, when we ask for help, there is always a delay. There's another rule that's being delayed and delayed and delayed. People are still dying. The blood is on the street. That has to stop. The methods in which it got there has to stop. There's been a decay in the moral fiber of a number of the agencies in this area when it comes to giving people justice, equality, and clean air. One of the most important things to live, you have to have clean air. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Next, we have Mark Lopez.
Hello. Hi, my name is Mark Lopez. I'm a resident of East Los Angeles and a member of East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. Thank you for the presentation, Ian. I think it's just something we're going to definitely be sharing back with our communities. This is good news. I think oftentimes when we come here, we're angry, we're frustrated, and we're still angry and frustrated, right? I'm not going to act like we're not. But it is also important to acknowledge and celebrate the progress, right? And the importance that this has beyond the Air District, right? I was just at the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council in Alabama last week. I think it was last week, talking about this, talking about the victories here and how they can be replicated in other communities. And so know that a lot of those website clicks are coming from other parts of the country. At the same time, I wish that we had this data for 10 years of emissions reductions at the ports. We could have had that presented today. But because previous iterations of this board have dragged their feet, not only are we not seeing the data, but literally lives have been lost because of those emissions. And so we're looking for that moving forward with Port ISR.
Thank you for your comments. That's the last speaker here. Any speaker out in TV land?
We have 3 hands raised.
I'm talking about out here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Carlos, anyone at your location? And Supervisor Perez? Seeing none, we do have 3 online. First one is called iPhone. iPhone, you have 1.5 minutes.
Hi, sorry, this is Adrian Martinez with Earth Justice. First off, I want to thank staff for a great presentation and the board for adopting this rule. I also want to congratulate all the environmental justice leaders that are at the district today and on the line listening. I hate to go back in time, but I think it's important as we look at this During this rulemaking, some of the business lobbyists, including the shipping industry, made several claims about the warehouse ISR. They said it would result in loss of jobs and businesses leaving the state. They were wrong. The staff presentation shows warehouses are increasing. They said the rule was unlawful. They were wrong. They lost in court. They said the warehouse ISR will not reduce emissions. They were wrong. The rule has resulted in important emissions reductions. And finally, they said the warehouse ISR will not succeed because of unavailable technology needed to earn wear points. They were wrong. Hundreds of zero emission units have been deployed. ISR saves lives. ISR is important to address environmental injustice near our ports, rail yards, and warehouses. And despite hyperbolic claims, these flexible and reasonable ISRs do not inhibit economic growth. We need to make sure these ISRs succeed, and we need to adopt more ISRs to protect communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Taylor. You have 1.5 minutes.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Taylor Thomas. I'm with East York Communities for Environmental Justice. I'm a resident of Long Beach. Similar to Adrian's comments, I want to thank the staff for this great presentation. It definitely highlights the power of regulation. I think to speak to, I'm not sure if it was Supervisor Perez's earlier comments about the board and the agency doing its work. But we weren't seeing these emissions reductions before this regulation existed. And also some people on this board oppose this regulation, but based on your own analysis, we are seeing emissions reductions. Like Adrian mentioned, warehouses didn't just up and leave the region, they're still here and more are being built every day. And so I want to underscore that this is very critical that we stay rooted in the mission of this agency. The mission of this agency is to protect public health, and many times that requires regulatory action. We've seen voluntary actions not yielding any results. And also uplift that in many of our regions, particularly in the Southeast LA region, there's a lot of warehouses that are not captured under this rule because of their size, but we experience clusters. And so the totality of the warehouses in our communities exceed beyond that. So yeah, just stay the course, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Last, we have Christian Tapia. And I'll close the public comment queue at this time.
Hi, good morning, AQMD board and staff. My name is Christian Tapia. I'm a climate campaigner with Pacific Environment. I'm also a downtown Long Beach resident. Just wanted to thank you for sharing updates on the implementation of the warehouse ISR. I know, as many have shared, it's exciting and a relief to see how it's already begun cleaning up the polluting logistics industry. Some important findings that Ian shared that I saw, that warehousing is continuing to grow in the South Coast region. Most warehouses aren't using the mitigation fee, which is good to see. And that ZE technology is scaling at a rate that wouldn't be possible or that we wouldn't see without this regulation. All of this is bringing, substantial health benefits to and cleaning up frontline communities who for decades have been experiencing dangerous levels of air pollution because of goods movement. And all of this while our economy is still continuing to move forward in a more sustainable way. We know it was no easy feat for the board and for staff to pass such a critical life-saving regulation. And many EJ advocates and community members here have shared that, we've had our fair share of time and energy put into helping get this rule passed as well. We're now hearing the same type of obstructionist claims being used by industry for the ports ISR, just as they did with the warehouse ISR and with the rail ISR as well. So we urge you to continue standing with frontline communities, families, and workers by delivering on a strong ports ISR. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Last is Allison Hom. You have 1.5 minutes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Allison Hom. I'm an attorney with NRDC. Just calling in today to echo other impact project member comments that you heard. I am really grateful for this presentation and just really appreciate the success that AQMD made possible with this warehouse ISR, and just hope that this is sort of a reminder and just a model for next steps for the port ISR. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for not only showing the potential for new technology and for emission reductions in the region, but also just a new way of living in the South Coast and with clean air. So I hope the Port ISR does, follow on the footsteps of this warehouse ISR success, and really appreciate your time today. So looking forward to working together on the next round of the ISR.
Thank you very much. That concludes our public comment on this item. We'll go on to written reports. We have two colleagues. Is there any need to have presentations or discussion on those written reports?
No.
Seeing none, we'll go on to other business. Is there any other business we need to talk about? Seeing none, we'll go on to general public comment. We have speakers here.
We have 3 comment cards.
Go ahead.
So first up, Thurl Golden, followed by Whitney Amaya.
We're still at 1.5 minutes.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
Okay. Thurl Golden, I'd like to take this opportunity to address the commission. In matter of fact, the previous work that you displayed was excellent, and we are moving in the right direction. But when it comes to the port facilities, the San Pedro Bay port facilities, there always seems to be a delay based on misinformation. Just as in the warehouse ISR, the same allegations are being made. It's going to cost jobs. It's going to do this. This is a public health institution here, and we should be grounded around public health. The health of the communities are deteriorating while we wait, and that must cease. We have to be more proactive. The labor groups, some are complaining that they're going to lose jobs. The terminal operators are waiting to know what to do so they can get on with their work. Yet and still, the residents, the communities are suffering. These type of things must stop, and let's get on with the business of the people, not the industry.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Next is Whitney Amaya, and the last speaker will be Fernando Gaitan.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Whitney Amaya. I'm a community member from West Long Beach and with Eastern Communities for Environmental Justice. I want to echo what was shared by the last speaker and just give thank you for the presentation of the Warehouse ISR. Like I mentioned, industry will claim wrongfully, right, that this is going to lead to a loss of jobs, but it's been proven wrong. And what we've seen from the Warehouse ISR is that ISRs work. That is the solution. So we need you to do your job and regulate the ports as well in order to reduce emissions. We need a strong port ISR that sets clear targets, that leads to emission reductions, that facilitates a zero emission transition, and that provides transparency to our communities. We've been waiting for decades. There's always pivots to MOU or something else, and what we find out is that doesn't work, right? So we come right back to ISR. And so instead of doing this whole back and forth and wasting our time and not cleaning up the air, do your job. You're a regulating agency. We need an ISR now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Good morning, Fernando Gaitan with Earth Justice. Members of the committee, I won't belabor this. You've heard from my colleagues, and I wanted to just echo what you've heard today. The Warehouse ISR teaches us many lessons. The fact that it has catalyzed investments in infrastructure, resulted in actual emissions reductions, and facilitated new actions and business models that will support ZE technology. These types of actions are needed to meet the crisis of non-attainment and the public health crisis that our region currently faces. For decades, our region has exceeded national air quality standards for particulate matter and ozone, and has experienced some of the worst air in the nation. And it's an estimated approximately 1,500 premature deaths could be avoided if our region were to attain NOx and achieve those standards. And yet the region has failed to attain yet a single ozone standard. I raise this because the work that does not end with the warehouse ISR. As you've heard, for decades, we have known that the pollution derived from freight, particularly the ports, harms our community's health. And so we need to stay the course, and I urge you not to be swayed by the tactics that you've heard during the warehouse ISR when it comes to the port ISR. We know that technology exists. We know what needs to be done. We know that rules make a difference when they're enforced. So I urge you to really stay the course and work towards passing a port indirect source rule in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. That's the last speaker in House, and there are none online. Therefore, I will adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting is Friday, November 15th at 9 o'clock, same place. Thank you all for attending.